Now let's go ahead and set up Firebase. Go to the Firebase console and create a new Firebase project. Once that's complete, head over to the project settings. Go ahead and click Add App, and we'll start with the iOS setup. You'll need to choose a unique bundle ID, and you'll want to choose something that makes sense here because it's not easy to change later, especially if you've already deployed your app to the App Store. I'm going to go ahead and give mine a name of io.fireship.quizdemo. Go ahead and download the Google Services plist file and save it to the runner directory in your Flutter app in the iOS directory. At this point for iOS, you can also open up your app in Xcode, and you'll want to drag this file into the runner/runner directory in the Xcode dashboard itself. They don't make this very clear in the documentation, but you need to actually save this file in Xcode specifically. And that's all it takes for iOS. Now let's move on to Android. The Android setup is a little more complex. First, we'll go into the Firebase console, add a new app, and add our bundle ID just like we did for iOS. Now, certain services that we'll be using, like Google Sign-In, require a sign-in certificate. Now, if you're not using Google Sign-In, you can just skip this step, but we're going to be using it in this course, and you'll find a link below to the commands to run this on your local system, depending on if you're on Mac or Windows. If you get an error that says key tools not found, that either means you don't have Java installed or you don't have the key tool in your path. If you do run into that problem, it's a very simple solution, but specific to the operating system. To be honest, the best solution is to just Google it, and you should get a quick answer on Stack Overflow. Go ahead and paste in the SHA certificate, and then click ahead to the next step, which will give us this Google Services JSON file to download. Save that file in the Android app directory. Inside the Android directory, you'll see two different build Gradle files, one in the root directory and one in the app directory. In the root build Gradle file, you'll want to make sure that you have Google in the highlighted spots here, and you'll also want to add Google Services version 3.2.1 as a dependency. Then in the app level build Gradle file, you'll want to make sure to update the application ID to your app ID, and then also set the minimum SDK version to 21. And lastly, go all the way down to the bottom and add the Google Services plugin there as well. Now that we have the setup done for the native platforms, we need to install the Flutter Fire plugins. As you can see here, Firebase offers a whole bunch of different services, so we only need to include the plugins that we're actually going to use in this app. Every app needs to include Firebase Core, and in this course we're also going to be using Cloud Firestore, Firebase Auth, and Firebase Analytics. You'll want to register those packages under the dependencies, and then when you save the file, it will automatically install them in your project. And while we're in here, I'd also like to point out that I have RxDart, Provider, and Font Awesome Flutter installed. We'll look at those more closely when the time comes later in the course. At this point, you can go ahead and run Flutter Run again from the command line, but you might see this error that's related to Android X. If you don't see the error, you can go ahead and move on. But if you do see it, you can fix it by going back into the Android folder to the Gradle properties and then adding these two additional properties to that file. Use Android X and enable Jetafire. Save the file and run Flutter Run again, and this time your app should compile without errors. Now we should be 100% ready to start building our Flutter Fire app. But before we go any further, I want to show you some pro tips for working with Flutter in VS Code that will dramatically improve your developer happiness.